the reason we have a business at all is that companies have struggled always to find a way to get what their brain trust is learning out into content.
Welcome to Channel 2, Tech meets the world, where CTOs share the tales and the comments. So startups do big names, innovations unfold. How many CTOs will share their stories untold?
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast. My name is Scott Porad, and I'm here with my co-host,
Brad Hefta-Gaub.
And today we have a special guest, a gentleman named Dan Woods. Dan and I crossed paths many, many, many years ago in the pre-first .com boom area. That's like the pre-Cambrian era of the internet, I guess, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. 1998.
Yeah. I was working at a company called Starwave, and Dan was working on a project called The Street, and those two things came together, and then we recently got reacquainted. So we're excited to have Dan here today because he's been doing some work to help software engineers like us and product management folks tell their stories better. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, well, it's really nice to be here. I really enjoy your podcast. It's fun and it's light, and you also take the time to actually wander into the cool areas. And so I just really was excited to talk about what I've discovered recently about founder-led marketing and my the way it makes sense of my career in a way, but also the way that it can be applied to tech companies. And I think that there's a lot of mistakes tech companies and CTOs make when they try to tell their stories. And I just wanted to go over some of the things I've learned in my career about that, but also some of the ways that I think founder-led marketing can be adapted to help tell the story of a tech company and a tech executive. The problem I see in the way the tech founder-led marketing works right now is that it's based on assumptions about how content's created that I don't think are as universally applicable as some people think. So, but anyway, let's get into it.
Well, before we jump into it, let's actually pick up the story where we left off. It's 1998. I'm in Seattle, Washington doing Starwave. I think you're in New York City doing thestreet.com. And what's happened in between?
Well, when I was at thestreet.com, I was in my first CTO gig because I had been at Pathfinder, which was Time Inc.'s big experiment in putting all of its content online, which they started in like 1994, 1995. I spent 3 years there doing what I wanted to call being an applications editor, because I saw technology as content. And I thought that it would be important for people to understand how to use, applications as content. And people got it, and we were able to do a lot of really cool experiments based on the content that was at the Time Inc. properties. And we had the best properties. We had People Magazine and Time Magazine, but then we also had the bizarre collection of stuff like Future Farmer or something like that, and all sorts of other crazy, the Weather Channel and other things like that were all under the umbrella. So we were able to do experiment after experiment, like for Money Magazine, for example. We did, this was in 1996, 97. We did they always had a Best Cities in America edition, that would declare the best city in America. But then we said, why don't we take that data and allow you to tune the parameters of the model so you could find your own best city. So, we created a best city calculator where you could say, no, I really like the arts. I don't really care about, transportation, blah, blah, blah. And, it was that sort of thing. And it was really fun. And then that led to me going to thestreet.com, which was another perfect synthesis of my career, because I started in 1980 as a graduate with a BA in computer science, worked in IBM, systems programming. Then after doing a variety of jobs, I went to journalism school, and I worked at the Bergen Record as a beat reporter covering banking. And then I went to the Raleigh News and Observer and worked there doing data journalism way early, and also doing internet applications as well, because they were one of the first internet newspapers.
I have to jump in there for a second.
Sure.
There was a time in history when someone decided that journalism was a better career opportunity than being a software engineer.
Well, it wasn't considered a wise choice by many, but you know, I had been in the tech world and I had been in seeing, what tech was like in big companies, seeing what tech was like in Wall Street consulting. And it was either time to do a startup or time to keep learning. And I thought,
Hmm.
I've been writing all my life. I was always doing freelance journalism. I just want to keep learning. And so I wanted to become a real writer, you know, and
Hmm.
and so that's what I did. I went to journalism school, and journalism school is sort of like art school, you know, like the it doesn't really kind of. There was a paper that was written while I was in journalism school called "The Unconscious Fraud of Journalism Education," and that unconscious fraud of X education applies all over the place. And whatever it is, but the journalism, fits into that category, which is, you have skills as a writer, you have skills as an analyst, you have skills as a reporter. Going to journalism school helps those a bit, but then you really learn when you go out and do the job. And so all I wanted to do was
Yeah.
skip the first 3 years at a small paper. So I did. I was
Hmm.
able to get the Bergen Record, which is a relatively large regional paper, as my first job. And so, but yeah, that's why I did it, is because I wanted to be a real writer.
That's great. And then what? Then you ended up at
So
the street.
So I then went to the News and Observer, and then I went to the Street. And at the Street, I was, very much in my element. I was creating the technology to be the foundation for one of the first internet publications, pure play
Hmm.
internet publications. It was a wonderful time. Jim Cramer, who's, still on CNBC, was the boss, and he's a very mercurial guy who would call you up and yell at you and stuff like that. And it was, the dot-com era, so it was crazy. And what we were trying to do is, support a newsroom of journalists under the editorship of Dave Kansas, and we were trying to, help them, be a successful publication. Now all of the people there were from legit journalism, and the weird part of it was that they wanted to show that the internet could be a home for legit journalism.
Yeah.
But this was very early on in the ad market, you know, and also the idea of following traffic wasn't a a really important idea to the newsroom. They wanted to break news and serve the financial public the same way that the Wall Street Journal did or the New York Times did. And so that recipe didn't turn out to find a business model because they kept saying over and over, we don't want to be a tip sheet. We don't want to be a tip sheet. But essentially that's what eventually it became much more like,
Yeah.
which is what people want is, ideas for how to invest their money, much less, legit journalism about, covering the financial world. So it was a great time to be there. And, it's crazy, just a wild time. And, as being at
Yep.
Starwave. But then I went from there to another startup called uh, Capital Thinking, which was a commercial mortgage loan automation system, and we did that for 3 years. And that was one of the ones where I started in the chairman's basement, and then built, as the number two, person, hired the whole technology team and the whole company. And like many, and that lasted until like 2002. And then I made another decision about what I was going to do. Again, should I go back into tech? Should I try to do a journalism, career? But I said this is the time to start my own thing, and so I started Evolve Media, which the idea of which is to use my tech background and my writing skills to help create content about technology. And I found a niche in doing that first with SAP, where I wrote lots of books that were the foundation of their go-to-market in the 2003 to 2012. I think we've written more than 15 books for SAP. Then that led into a more traditional content marketing um, sort of play where I was doing white papers and books and things like that. And then that led into what I'm doing now, which is this founder-led marketing, which sort of puts all of that together, really.
Dan, can you for those people I mean founder-led marketing, it sounds like probably what it is, like the phrase, but can you kind of describe to us What is the essence of founder-led marketing? And
Yeah, the essence of founder-led marketing is the idea that founders have star power and they are human beings with multidimensional aspects to them. And if they communicate as human beings authentically to the public that they are seeking to serve, they can then build an audience that can be hugely useful to them in building pipeline, in raising awareness, in doing a variety of other things, and so that they end up being a force in the marketing and growth of their company. Now, there's a bunch of tricky things about it that I've come to learn as I've been essentially helping people do founder-led marketing, my whole career, because half of the stuff we did was executive streams of executive articles, which were you know intended. They weren't. The only difference was they were intended for placement most of the time, not for publication directly. And the other part of founder-led marketing is that direct access. Usually it's LinkedIn is the starting point and the hub, but the idea is you are directly publishing there yourself, not trying to get placed in another article somewhere. And you're also commenting and interacting with your audience. And like I think the kind of the big star success story of this is a guy named Adam Robinson at retention.com. And he does the perfect founder-led playbook where he talks about himself, he talks about the problems he's having running the company. He's very open, he's very creative, and he talks about other issues. So the idea is that you use your humanity and people, founders are often very, very interesting people who have lots of ideas about lots of stuff, and then that's why people follow them. And usually they're talking a lot about the problem they're trying to solve, but not just in a hey, we added a new feature, but also in like, oh man, I'm trying to figure out where we should spend more time on this part of the product or that part of the product, or oh no, we just lost a client and this is what they said to us. I'm trying to figure out how to fix that. It's got to be sort of that sort of thing. Authentic is usually the word used to describe it. But then as I've come to understand it more, I've started to realize that when you apply founder-led marketing to a tech company, the traditional playbook needs adjustment, and that's mostly what I wanted to talk about today.
Well, okay, so that begs two questions. And maybe you've already answered the first one a little bit. What is the traditional playbook, and then how does it get adjusted? Because I don't think it's founders going on there and saying, "Here's what I had for lunch today." Right?
I want to ask a question related to what I think Scott just asked, which is, are there specific types of businesses that are more appropriate for founder-led marketing? You're sort of it sounds like you're going to kind of talk about the differences for tech companies. So I'm just kind of curious. The standard playbook, who does this work for?
If you look back in time, you can see that Steve Jobs was the ultimate founder-led marketer.
Totally.
In that he had an audience, and he directly communicated with the world. Elon Musk is another example of that. In that they have a direct connection, and so. But the most of the time, the founder-led marketing is usually applied to a B2B context. It certainly does work in the B2C context, but that's already so saturated with the Kylie Jenners of the world and the Goop and Gwyneth Paltrow. They don't even need to call it founder-led marketing. It's just the way things are done, in the B2C world. The reason there's a name for it in the B2B world is because it's a little unusual for somebody to take that role.
I see. That makes sense.
The example I'm thinking of is Rand Fishkin.
Absolutely. Perfect example.
Originally of sort of SEO Moz, and now he's doing something called Spark Toro, but he's put himself out there on the internet, very vulnerable about exactly what's going on with him and his companies and how they do it, and he's charted his own path.
He is a perfect example of a very, very successful practitioner of founder and a very conscious practitioner of founder-led marketing. I recently saw him on a podcast where he talked about how he timed the official launch of his departure from Moz with the announcement of Spark Torah. So he wanted to maximize, and then and lately people have been doing things like using their funding announcements as a big, having the CEO be the main channel for the funding announcement, and then using that as a major marketing event, to achieve a lot of very specific marketing goals, such as, build pipeline, promote demos, grow the audience, all of those things.
Okay, so I think the answer to my question, Dan, is that founder-led marketing probably works with most businesses. B2C businesses, you actually see that a lot. They just don't call it that. And where you see most of this happening is in the B2B space. And we've just enumerated a couple examples. So maybe the next really appropriate question is, to Scott's point, like, is there a kind of a summary of that playbook that people typically execute?
Yeah, and that's where you get into the observations I have about what should be different about it. The
Yeah.
standard playbook is that the founder is sort of taught and encouraged to start writing in multi dimensions. Every single CEO at a B2B company you see posting, hey, we're going to the RSA conference, or just had a great partnership announcement with this company, or just hired a great new chief revenue officer, or all these sort of like HR announcements, or PR type announcements. What founder-led marketing means is to let's take the pedal off of that official marketing kind of content, and let's add to the mix. Oh, what Benioff said about 50% of the work at being done at Salesforce is just BS. That's just it's an irresponsible thing. Why is he saying that? It's giving us all a bad name by just doing this, fear, uncertainty, and doubt sort of play. Or, every time, Sam Altman opens his mouth, he says that people who are in their 20s are using Chat GPT for everything, but people in their 40s only use it for this limited thing, and nobody asks, well, isn't that in his interest to say that, to encourage everybody? So just stuff with an edge, stuff that pisses you off, like, it really makes me mad that this is happening, or here's the feature that in our space, in our category, that we all have to get right to be successful. If my prediction is anybody that doesn't get this feature right is going to fail, and here's what we're doing to make that right. And of course, that's on message, but the idea is it's not necessarily as much about the feature as it's about his struggle as a CEO to actually make it happen. And
It's the personalizing of the founder outside, in the context of their business, but like you used the word authenticity earlier, so it's this notion of trying to create the image of the founder as a person.
Right. And that the idea of that is not every founder is different. So some founders will be deep tech, doing, coding analysis, and that's their thing. And the other founders will be really funny, the humanity of the idea is that's the center of it. And then the typical, advice given in most founder-led, agencies is, boy, you got to have the CEO has to write. They have to become a social media thinker. They have to do all of this work hands-on themselves. Otherwise, it's not authentic. And there are good reasons for those agencies to say that. The reason mostly is that if they talk to the CEO and try to write for him or her, they can't do it. Because if you're going to write about a tech company, you're going to write an authentic piece of content, even a short one, about the struggles of a CEO, you have to know the product that they're selling, and you have to know the differentiating features of that product, and you have to know how that's rendered into messaging, and you have to know the category, and you have to know the general engineering and marketing and sales and financial processes that CEO is having to deal with. And then you have to know other contexts that are related. And so because I've worked been doing content for 20 years, I can actually, and my team can actually write and listen to a CEO and come up with authentic content. And so because the way that it's usually pitched, we have to have the CEO do it. Well, that really limits the number of CEOs that are going to be able to do founder-led marketing because,
Mhm.
Yeah.
how many people are like the stars who've done it right, like Adam Robinson, who are talented writers, talented storytellers, very flamboyant? Not many. But if you can use, like it's sort of like a ghost writer, but it's really more like a ghost analyst, a ghost product marketer, would be perhaps a better idea. And so that's the first thing that I think, is different than that we are trying to get across. The second part of that is that LinkedIn is a great channel, but if you are going to be a serious, if you're talking about serious tech people, they are on all sorts of other channels too, and they're less on LinkedIn than you would think. And they're also the highest consumers of ad blocking and all this other technology. So a lot of the second part of the playbook is that you then see what works, and then you use LinkedIn advertising, which has a variety of different structures for doing ads. They have conversational ads, where you can promote little individual posts. They have ads that allow you to promote decks. They have all sorts of other boosting mechanisms for posts. And so that's the other part of most founder-led marketing agencies, is that they're amplifying using paid media. And the thing about that for developers hate marketing, technology people hate marketing, and they only want education. And so the for a tech company, the CEO has to be teaching obscure stuff that people would find interesting. And that's way more technical than your typical, authentic for a tech founder is getting into some deep tech,
Yeah.
and even if for a B2B founder. I mean, you see it, it's getting into the weeds and saying, look, this is how it works. And so what we bring to the table and what I'm really happy about is the idea that I can open this founder-led marketing up for a lot more people uh, who won't be able to write for themselves, who can just, if we can talk to them once a week, then we can, and then we have a trusted party to approve our posts and stay out of trouble, then we can keep that going without the CEO having to spend a lot of time on it. Then we have to be able to comment based on what the CEO has to say, because you have to do founder-led marketing. Another part of the playbook is you have to be engaging. Just
Yes.
publishing isn't the algorithm doesn't like that, and also, you need to, in order to bring people in, you have to reach out to them. So, you have to be, talking to other people.
This is great, Dan. It's helping me get a better picture of this. And I think I think what I'm hearing, and maybe you could, if I play this back, you could tell me if I'm getting it or if I'm missing some core points about it. But I think what I hear you saying is, especially for technology companies in the B2B space, where their target customers are very technical, the only meaningful way to reach them with the founder-led marketing playbook is you need to present an authentic technical voice that is that blend of like why as a founder I even took this problem on, the passion of solving AI automated telemetry. We've got to get. I spent years in DevOps just watching all these, telemetry, signals, and I want to solve that problem, and I get passionate about that. And your agency has sort of found that magic of, hey, look, we know this needs to be a deep technical conversation, and also it needs to be an engaging conversation, and you got to be able to understand that deep technology if you're going to help echo that voice or amplify that voice on the behalf of these founders.
Yeah, and also do it in a time efficient way. I mean, the reason we have a business at all is that companies have struggled always to find a way to get what their brain trust is learning out into content. And when they use freelancers or other marketing writers or technical writers, they don't have the understanding of the technology. They don't understand of the business and IT context. And so that's why, we've written more than 34 books. We've done, dozens of hundreds of white papers. All of it's about, talking to that brain trust and extracting what they know. Because that's the most valuable news a company has, which is what are we learning about how to solve this problem? You know, that's the news that their ICPs want the most. And so that's understanding how to extract that. And we have a lot of our own process surrounding that as well. And so you hit the nail on the head in terms of like the essence of what you need to do for a tech founder. But there's a bunch of other jobs that founder-led marketing can do that generally the founder-led marketing agencies aren't worried about, because they sort of give up and they assume that the founder will be the kind of person who will run the editorial calendar, on instinct or whatever. So another adjustment I have to the founder-led playbook is the idea is that you can start solving specific communication problems while you stay authentic. So you can authentically talk about sales enablement issues that are coming up, and why those are so difficult to deal with. And, you can authentically talk about objections that people have and why those objections reflect an improper way of thinking about the problem. You can talk about like messaging that you are trying to play with, and propose it, and test it out. You can talk about the way you want your company to think, and they will pay more attention because you're bragging in public than they would if you put out a messaging document, internally. So I think that the other thing that I think, especially in tech companies, that a founder-led marketing program can do is serve a lot of other roles. It can help with product marketing, with sales enablement, with one of my favorite new concepts is message enablement, which is actually really teaching people how to understand the message so they can use it in their jobs. And so, that is, again, a lot of companies, a lot of CEOs try to do this, but just in a very ham-handed way, where they don't kind of make it authentic. They don't make it more personal. But just because it's authentic doesn't mean it has to be off message.
Right.
So here's a question, Dan, that you would have some experience with, I bet. There's that story that you hear in that famous David Foster Wallace speech about graduation speech about the fish swimming to work. There's two young fish swimming to work one day. We're swimming home from the night shift, and an old savvy fish swimming to work in the morning. And the old fish asks the little fish, how's the water? And the young fish say, what's water? And you don't know it when you're in it. And I would imagine a lot of these founders are unconscious of what they actually know that other people don't know, that would be interesting, or novel, or have a different take or perspective, because they're in it. They're like the young fish. And I'm curious to know, when you work with founders, like what are techniques or approaches or methods, whatever, I don't know, that you use to help the founders understand what they know that maybe somebody else doesn't know?
Yeah.
To them, it just seems obvious.
Yeah. When we started an engagement, we have a long list of questions in lots of dimensions. So like, what are you personally interested in? Because if you want to do this right, you're going to return to themes, and people are going to understand. Like, I'm into Indian cooking, so I write about Indian cooking, all the time. I've written blogs about recipes and things like that. Turns out a bunch of my clients were instant pot cooks, so I'm an instant pot cook. So that's one thing that can be used over and over. Then you talk about what are they passionate about, like just in general about stupid things that the tech industry think. Why people talking their book and not being called on it, is one thing that is one of my pet peeves. But other people have pet peeves where they just don't like the way people think about tech. Just not necessarily only in their their domain. And then you go on about, why they, what's the hero story that led them to the category, and what are the points of pain that we're really solving, and what are the ones that we doing a crappy job on, and on and on. And then you get this kind of like really detailed persona, and then we understand that, and then we can help them. We can have an open-ended conversation with them, where we ask provocative and probing questions, where we bring to them ideas like, hey, these guys are doing this. Based on what you've told us, you should hate that. And you said, well, actually, I only hate this part of it. I really like the other part of it. And, and all of a sudden then
Right.
now, we've presented an idea that then led to the authentic response.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
uh, there's a different breeds of, their CEOs are all over the place. In the tech world, you do find people who you ever, like Chad Dickerson, a friend of mine who was the CTOs and then CEO of Etsy. He's a very introverted person,
Hmm.
and so, you might have to kind of at first tease him out about, well, why would anybody be interested in what I thought? Well, because you've built this amazing organization and you can deploy software 30 times a week, safely. Yeah, that, maybe they learn how you figured that out, And then,
Right.
once you go, oh, that would be interesting, then oh, that would be interesting. Oh my God, you're kidding. Wait, they'd want to know that much detail? Absolutely.
Right.
So, and then of course, we're not going to we can't write, 5,000 word posts initially. Eventually, this stuff can be, added up into bigger content. And then, that's another part of our playbook that's unusual for founder-led marketing. None of the founder-led marketing agencies try to think of how that content then gets added up into longer form stuff like white papers or books. And that's what we've been doing for more than 20 years. It's hard to blog your way to a book, but you can blog your way, especially in the world of AI, to half a book, and then you can finish the book. So
Okay, it took us like 32 minutes into the episode here,
Before
Brad.
AI got
30
mentioned.
minute before AI got brought up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's a
It
new
happens every
record.
time.
So this question's been on my mind for like probably 20 minutes now. I've been waiting for us to get here, which is the AI founder-led marketing bot, right? Which is if I'm a founder and I can, and I don't know if this exists. Maybe this is our next startup, Brad. If I can feed it my emails and I don't know, all sorts of stuff, so it can learn who I am,
Yep.
and then it can go be that avatar, so to speak. It's not really an avatar, but you get my point, I think,
Oh yeah.
on the internet. Is that what's coming? Is that the future?
Well, the found if you've listened and read as much about founder-led marketing as I have, one of the most common themes is that please don't make your posts created by AI.
Hmm.
People can tell AI is not doing authentic posts. That said, it's crazy to not use AI as a brainstorming mechanism. It's crazy not to use it for research. It's crazy not to use it and this is what we use it for all the time. Google Notebook is an excellent way to, allow you to load up one interview transcript, 10 interview transcripts. And then when you're on a new post, you want to say, well, how do we distill what CEO says about, this obscure thing that's been covered maybe 3 times in 10 interviews, and then you get that answer really well, very, chunk, and then you fold it in. The idea is that, there's huge advances in, avatars and video and film. But the way I see all this going is that as the cost of production drops to zero or close to zero, what then matters? And then what we're back, and this is a really interesting point that I'm trying to develop. This is going to be my next book. We're back in a world of drama and theater. We are now going to be worried about what's important to say and how to characterize it and how to create drama in telling that story. Because it's going to be so easy to tell a story that's visually exciting. And the question is, does anybody give a shit? What Netflix pays a lot of attention to is, do people finish the show when, if it's got 10 episodes? And so we've all watched shows and series on Netflix or HBO or whatever. And then all of a sudden, we're at the third episode and we're like, we don't know why, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to watch the fourth episode. And so I think that product marketing in general is going to become a lot more like what they call in the theater dramaturgy, which is the idea of crafting the story so it's more effective, crafting the mechanisms of the play so that the story is better served, and the drama and then you've used several times the idea of the hero story. That's a fundamental poetics concept, and that's what's going to become more important as all of the AI makes the production, high quality production, and then as part of that, included in as a carry along for dramaturgy, humor. If you go to a Shakespeare production, you're laughing half the time. Shakespeare is funny as hell. Even Hamlet, even these dramatic plays, they are hilarious. And they're hilarious even in super dramatic moments. So, I think, how can we be funny is another way that's going to distinguish and give you permission to communicate, with the audience. And so AI can participate in all of this, but I have friends who are comedy writers who say that AI can do a pretty good job of writing the first level of jokes, but then you
gotta
raise the bar.
You gotta punch them up.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting you say this, Dan. Like I mean, I kind of want to challenge you on this and say, yes, today that sounds right. I can't count the number of you know, LinkedIn posts I see that are just riddled with M dashes and emojis, and I'm just like, come on, at least if you're going to use the generative AI, tell it to exclude emojis and M dashes, because it's obvious you used ChatGPT to write that thing. So I think there's this.
Wait a second. Wait, hang on a second. Are you saying that M dashes and emojis are a signal of AI written content?
Yes, 100%.
I did not know that.
Yes.
I'm an M dash user. I'm going to have to get rid of that.
If you are default in your writing using M dashes, people are going to start assuming you use ChatGPT to write it.
Wow. Why does ChatGPT use a lot of M dashes?
I think because it was
So
trained
that's a whole
on.
other episode.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
Exactly.
Have you seen
Trained
this,
on
Dan?
everything I wrote is what you're saying.
It's sort of like people send me DMs and stuff that were obviously written by AI. It's sort of like that, that fourth episode of Netflix show. You sort of like, it just doesn't feel right. It just, sometimes it's obvious, like you said, but sometimes it just feels empty.
But I think it's going to get better. I mean, I'll just say that the notion of to Scott's idea, the notion of let's load up one of the LLMs with every piece of content I've ever actually written, email, every speech I've ever given, and then start interrogating it and saying, well, what's Brad's opinion on this, right? And I have a feeling that it'll do pretty well on
and
a lot
also
of things.
it's really important to remember in marketing, a lot of it is just educating the public about who you are, what you do, how to think about what you do. And so there's a lot of stuff that isn't the dramatic story that I'm talking about. It's just like, do you have a sign on your store that says that you sell deli sandwiches, or does your store say some clever little pun? Well, maybe it would be better if you had deli sandwiches, on their sign. You have to do all that basic, education of the market.
Yeah.
And and AI can help, create clear explanations. AI goes downhill really well. If you have a large body of content, and so, in product marketing, you want to have a whole ocean of content that's loaded up into your AI system, so that then you can go and focus it, with prompts and things like that. But then the question is, like, how do you get people to care about that? If they, a big, truth of marketing is that much successful marketing is really about the fact that the pain that people have is growing, that your timing was right. And you're
Yeah.
connecting to people who have a growing population who has that pain. That's a lot of marketing successes are about timing,
Timing.
they're not, marketing hardly ever creates intent that isn't there already. Sometimes you can
Yeah.
make people aware of intent that they don't, that they're, that they have, but to create, intent out of, the pain creates the intent, to search for a solution.
Dan, I have a slightly different question about founder-led marketing, and I'm like Scott, I was kind of dying to ask the implications of this. What what are the downsides to this? I mean, one of the most obvious downsides to me feels like, when Rand left SEO Moz, right? Like, what's the, like when your founder, if your founder is deeply tied to the product and the enterprise, doesn't that doesn't that put the enterprise at some risk?
Definitely, and if you, it doesn't really matter whether it's the founder, because you can do founder-led marketing, with senior executives, whether it's the CTO or whether it's the chief product
Hmm.
officer or whatever. And for founder-led marketing to work, you don't have to be as successful as Rand Fishkin in building an audience. You know,
Fair enough.
I mean, it can work on a much smaller scale, and then when you that person leaves or whatever, then you move to the um, next person. But there are other dangers from founder-led marketing that are really important to discuss. In every tech company these days, when we were back in the Starwave era, you know, a lot of the companies that were successful were kitchen gadgets. I remember there was a company that got sold for a lot of money that was just a website downloader, because everything was so slow that you could download a website to your PC and then interact that way. And then
Yep.
that tool sold for a lot of money. Or there was another one that just put stuff on your screensaver, put news on your screensaver. I can't remember that one.
Yep.
Something Wave, I think, or whatever. And that was a big deal for a while. And so
Yeah, I remember that.
yeah, and so these are like kitchen gadgets. They're like they do one thing. And now in the modern world, in the world of the cloud, of SaaS, of the internet, you may start out with a kitchen gadget, but you are a platform before your first year is over. And the danger with founder-led marketing is usually the founder thinks of the story they are going to tell to the early adopters. And that story is about usually what early adopters care about, which is like some technical transformation that they want to do. And, there's a great founder-led marketing podcast called Founder-Led Marketing. But on it, there was a guy that talked about how a financial planning company, their founder-led marketing was all about replacing Excel. But they became very successful, and then they were serving all sorts of other markets. And the other markets were now business people who wanted to do better planning to make their businesses better. And they didn't give a shit whether they were replacing Excel. So the founder-led marketing sort of reached a limit. It was like, oh, we're now telling the story of the early adopter who wants to replace Excel, but all our new market growth is coming from people who want to just do better at planning to get business results. And we're not talking to them. We're continuing to talk about how much Excel sucks, not about how you can actually improve your business outcome by
And
improving planning.
what's the risk there, Dan? Like it
The
seems
risk is
like
that the founder dominates the marketing, and then you just stay with that early adopter story.
I see.
You don't move to
Mm-hmm.
a news story
I see.
because you don't. And it's tricky. It's like you don't want to give up the first story. You still want to sell that story, but you want to tell a new story too. You want to,
Yeah,
and so,
Mm-hmm.
and the founder may not want to tell that story.
I
So
see.
so
Because it feels to me like that would be I feel like that would be an opening for a founder to be like, more of a founder-led story. Like, oh, I had no idea this would be interesting to this type of business, but we start seeing this traction that I would never have predicted. And then you get to tell this whole authentic story about like, I had an idea over here, and it turns out people really love it over here, and wow, isn't that cool and interesting? And like, what's my reaction to that as a founder? That sounds like an opportunity.
but they have to become aware of that that's happening,
Yeah,
and they also,
fair enough.
if you've been super successful, getting to a large ARR with a certain story, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you have to, somebody's got to have some cojones to, say, you know, stop telling that's worked for a long time. Let's just tell
Tell a
less
different
of it.
story.
Let's tell more of this, or at least do experiment.
It's
So,
it's the classic innovator's dilemma, just in sort of a different context.
yeah. And so I think that's one, problem that can happen with founder-led marketing, in addition to the one you said, and also, if it's just not natural, if somebody, not everybody's suited to it, but not then and the creativity is a part of it, and a lot of companies aren't, interested in fun and creativity. They're afraid of it. I mean, you don't want to be
I mean,
offensive,
there's
but
risk to
to
it,
be
right?
fun, you have to usually do something a little tricky, edgy. And that the idea of edgy is edgy is a big theme in the traditional founder-led marketing idea, and so because of that, it's not for everybody. Some people don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to
Right.
be dramatic and provocative.
Well, Dan, thank you very much for coming on today. If I was a founder and I wanted to get started with this, where would I begin?
Well, first, I mean, we would love to work with, founders, but the idea is, I think you have to ask yourself, even if I can make it happen for you in an hour a week, do you want to be that public?
Yeah.
Is that you? And it can be an introverted person. That's, it can be, lots of different personality types. But, if you sort of don't like interacting with people, it's probably not a good fit. But if you enjoy, if you extroverts are very natural for it. But even as an introvert, if you enjoy learning and teaching, I guess I would say, do I have something to teach the market? And then the second thing I would say is, I believe at the foundation of every story of a tech company, even a vector database company, is a set of beliefs, about
Mm-hmm.
the truth of what the problem is and how to solve it. And in every category, people the category believes the same thing. NoSQL databases all share the category belief: SQL sucks and has a lot of problems, and isn't suited for everything. Every single category, Neo4j, MongoDB, DataStax, SQL sucks. But then there's a difference between a document database, a graph database, a wide column database, and there are beliefs about that. And do you really feel passionate about those beliefs? And do you want to teach those beliefs? And does that really get you excited to teach somebody how to properly think about, NoSQL databases or wide column databases? I think that if you have that spark, we can help get that message out, and then,
That's a great place to start.
Yeah, makes a ton of
All right,
sense.
well, Dan, thank you for coming on today.
yeah, it was really fun. I
We
really
appreciate
enjoyed
it.
it.
I feel like I learned something.
Yeah, this is a very interesting
And
conversation.
Well, cool.
I hope it is not another 30 years before our paths cross again.
No, well, I live in New York City. Always good for an exploratory dinner.
I look
Nice.
forward to it. Wonderful. All right. Thank you, Dan. And I guess that concludes this episode of How Many CTOs Does It Take?
Today it took 3.
Remember to smash that subscribe button.
Yeah.
That's right. Smash, rate, and review. Oh, hey, I got my dad to give us 5 stars, Brad.
I saw a 5-star pop up, so I was like, okay.
He said he heard I had a podcast. I showed him how to put it on his phone. Sidebar, Apple Computer Company. Your podcast app is so unusable for a senior citizen. It is unbelievable.
Oh my.
And I said, Dad, you have to give me 5 stars.
There you go.
All right. See you guys next week.
Great talking to you, Scott. Great talking to you, Dan.
Thank you.
Bye.
This episode of How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast was edited by Saffron Hefta-Gaub. Our theme song was AI generated by Brad. Please follow us on all the social media platforms at How Many CTOs Pod. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, X, TikTok, and Patreon, or at our website at howmanyctospod.com. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Thanks for listening.